Okay, yes.
Have you suggested yet why, at this point, he's repeating all this stuff? All this earlier...
All the Old Testament stuff?
Right.
Because that's the meat of his whole thrust.
I mean, are they that tired of the Romans and they figured it's near the end and all that?
Well, they're not just tired of the Romans. He sees Rome as the embodiment of evil. Rome is the devil. Rome is Satan. And so all of this Holocaust and everything that's come is going to be the defeat of evil, which means the obliteration of Rome.
Didn't work too well.
Well, it eventually did because Rome doesn't exist anymore.
Right, yeah.
Okay, let me catch you up real quick on where we're at. We start out with God is in heaven holding the scroll. The scroll is God's plan for the future of the faithful. The scroll is sealed with 7 seals. And an angel is bemoaning the fact that they cannot find anyone in the universe who is worthy of opening the 7 seals. It's a tragedy because it means that God's plan for mankind cannot be revealed to mankind. Then we have the climatic scene. The Lamb enters the scene before the throne of God. The Lamb is bloodied, has 7 eyes and 7 horns. It symbolically represents Jesus Christ, who was bloodied from the sacrifice of his life and who is all-seeing and all-powerful. That's what the eyes and horns represent. And because of his sacrifice on the cross, he, and he alone, is worthy of opening the 7 seals. So last week, we opened the first 4 seals. The so-called 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. There was, first of all, the white horse, representing war, violence, and terror. And then there was the second horse, the red horse, representing bitterness, hatred, anger, and enmity between all peoples. Then there is the third horse, the black horse, representing famine. And finally, the pale horse, representing pestilence and death. Those are the first 4 seals. I'd like to point out something to you. People say, aha. Proof, right there. The world is about to end. The end is near. I mean, look around. Do we have violence and terrorism and war in the world today? Well, the white horse has come. You look around and you see all of the hatred and enmity between peoples in the world. Religious differences, national differences, racial differences. You see people, all this hatred. Aha. The red horse has come. Then third is the black horse of famine. Well, shoot, in Africa alone, hundreds of thousands of human beings have died from famine. The black horse is here, running rampant around the world. And what about the pale horse of pestilence and death? You don't think that AIDS and Ebola are pestilence? And the deaths that is caused all over the world? And people say, it's proof that the end is here. Well,
we're done here.
First of all, you can take any point in history, any decade in the history of mankind, for the past thousands of years, and you can say the very same thing. All those times, you can say the very same thing. There was pestilence and death and hatred and enmity and war and strife and violence all through human history. It doesn't change. It's the same as it ever was. Which is basically to say that, you know, the end isn't really any closer than it was at any other time, especially when John, the writer of Revelation, is not predicting the end of the world the way we're thinking of it here. He is predicting what needs to happen to Rome to save the poor Christians who are being so persecuted by the chaotic breakdown of society and the immoral debauchery and horror and violence of the Roman emperors. Okay, now, today we're going to open the 5th and 6th seals. Anybody know what the 5th seal is?
I didn't read ahead.
Chartreuse or something like that.
No. The 5th seal is the plight of the martyrs. The plight of the martyrs.
We're on chapter 6, right?
We are in chapter 6, and I'm going to read you first of all verses 9 through 11. When he opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the word of God and the testimony they had maintained. They called out in a loud voice, "How long, sovereign Lord, holy and true, until you judge the inhabitants of the earth and avenge our blood?" Then each of them was given a white robe, and they were told to wait a little longer until the number of their fellow servants and brothers who were to be killed as they had been was completed. Oh, for heaven's sakes, what does that mean?
No idea.
Well, hopefully we'll get through this then.
So wait a minute, Brian. Had the apostles all been martyred by now, by the time John wrote this?
It wasn't just the apostles. There were many, many Christians being martyred by the thousands by the Romans
Okay.
that refused to bow down and call the emperor Lord and Savior. And so it's not just the apostles, it's all those who have been martyred and died for their testimony. Okay? Jesus, when he was still alive, had left his followers with no doubt. You're going to follow me, you're going to be my disciple, you're going to stick with me, you're going to pay. There's going to be sacrifice. It's going to be hard. You are likely to lose your life for my sake. He never sugarcoated this. He never sugarcoated it at all. He told them exactly what they could expect. So, we have all the souls of those so slain are seen beneath the altar of heaven. And this is a really vivid picture for any Jewish person to behold. See, the Jews considered blood to be life. Okay? Blood was seen as life, and life belonged to God. The blood of a sacrifice was poured out at the base of the temple altar. Blood is offered to God beneath the altar as his due, life. The lifeblood of the martyrs has been poured out as their offering to God because he sees the martyrs at the foot of the altar. This is their life's blood has been sacrificed to God. Now, there's a number of things we need to note here. First of all, we read the eternal cry of the suffering righteous. They say, "How long?" How long what? How long is evil going to be permitted to afflict God's people? In the case of those early Christians, how long are they going to suffer this persecution? Where is God when the righteous are allowed to suffer? Boy, we ask the same question today. Where are you, God? Why don't you stop the terrible things that happen to good people, followers of yours, the faithful? They suffer. When are you going to put a stop to this? Another note, the saints want to see the punishment of their persecutors. Why? To enjoy it?
Sure.
Yeah, well, you know, you might be able to say, well, that's no better than the spectators in the Roman Colosseum watching the horrors perpetrated against the Christians. Now the Christians want to see horrible things done to their persecutors. What makes them any different? Isn't this just pure vengeance? Well, think about the fact, though, that these early Christians were burned alive. They were thrown to the lions. They were sadistically tortured and butchered. Maybe it's kind of easy for us to be critical here of the martyred souls, wanting to see the destruction of their persecutors. But we do not have to endure what they endured. So be careful you're not too critical here. You haven't been there. Another thing, the martyrs must rest a little longer until their number is made up to a certain level. You know, what is that? Well, it's a very Jewish idea. It's the idea that God was not going to intervene in history until the full measure of the appointed had been completely fulfilled. It's a concept that's kind of alien to us as Christians, but there is in the Anglican Book of Worship and Ritual a reference to this exact thing. It says in the Anglican Book of Prayer, "May it please thee, Lord, shortly to accomplish the number of thine elect and to hasten thy kingdom." See, it's a notion, a very curious notion, but behind it is the idea that all history is in the hand of God, and that in it and through it He is working His purpose out to a certain end. So that's what that basically refers to. All right. That is the fifth seal, the martyrs and their plea. Then the sixth seal comes, and the sixth seal is the universe being shattered and falling apart. I'll mention this right now. It's going to be a long time before we get to the seventh seal. You don't get to the seventh seal until chapter 8. So we've got the rest of chapter 6 and all of chapter 7 to go through before we get to the seventh and final seal, which, as I mentioned last week, is the biggie. Okay, so let me read what it says here in chapter 6, verses 12 through 14. I watched as he opened the sixth seal. There was a great earthquake. The sun turned black like sackcloth made of goat hair. The whole moon turned blood red. And the stars in the sky fell to earth as late figs drop from a fig tree when shaken by a strong wind. The sky receded like a scroll rolling up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place.
So we're talking about a big unveil.
Yes, yes. He didn't necessarily mention a tsunami in there, but he got just about everything else covered. Where in the world does John get this picture of the moon turning blood red, the sky's folding up, and the stars are falling and everything? Where does he get all of this from? He gets every single last detail of it from the Old Testament and intertestamental writings. Now, instead of making you guys look up about 25 or 30 different Bible references here to back this up, I'm going to use the notes I have here in Barclay, and you'll see if any of this sounds familiar from what I just read in those couple of verses. Earthquake. At the coming of the Lord, the earth will tremble. Amos 8. There will be a great shaking in the land of Israel. Ezekiel 38. The earth will quake and the heavens will tremble. Joel 2. God will shake the heavens and the earth and the sea and the dry land. Haggai 2. The earth will tremble and be shaken to its bounds. The hills will be shaken and fall. That's from the Assumption of Moses. The earth shall open and fire burst forth. 2nd Esdras 5. Whoever gets out of the war will die in the earthquake, and whoever gets out of the earthquake will die in the fire, and whoever gets out of the fire will perish in the famine. 2nd Baruch 70. Then there was this thing about the darkening of the sun, the moon turning red. The sun will set at midday, and earth will grow dark in the clear daylight. Amos 8. The stars will not shine, the sun will be darkened in its going forth, and the moon will not cause her light to shine. Isaiah 13. God will clothe the heavens with blackness, and will make sackcloth their covering. Isaiah 50. God will make the stars dark and cover the sun with a cloud. Ezekiel 32. The sun will be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood. Joel 2. The horns of the sun will be broken, and he will be turned into darkness. The moon will not give her light, and will be turned into blood, and the circle of the stars will be disturbed. Assumption of Moses 10. Then there's this thing about the falling of the stars. To the Jew, the last word in chaos was the world of falling stars. But in the end time, the host of heaven would be dissolved and fall down as the leaf falls from the vine and the fig from the fig tree. Isaiah 34. The stars will fall from heaven and the powers of heaven shall be shaken. Matthew 24.
Well, John wouldn't have gotten that, would he?
Why not?
Yeah, because John lived after Matthew.
Came way after Matthew.
Oh, okay, that's right.
Yeah, this
The
isn't John
firmament
the
shall
Apostle.
fall on the sea, and a cataract of fire will reduce the heavens and the stars to a molten mass. The Sibylline Oracles 3. The stars will transgress their all order and alter their orbits. Enoch 80. The ongoings of the stars will change. 2nd Esdras. And there's this folding up of the heavens. Picture in this passage is of a roll stretched out and held open and then suddenly split down the middle so that each half recoils and rolls up. God will shake the heavens, Isaiah 13. The heavens will be rolled together as a scroll, Isaiah 34. The heavens will be changed like a garment and folded up, Psalm 102. Then there's the moving of the hills and the islands of the sea. The mountains will tremble and the hills will be moved, Jeremiah 4. The mountains will quake and the hills will melt, Nahum 1.
Some of these books I've never heard of. Where are they out of?
Those are intertestamental writings, Esdras, Baruch,
Okay,
Assumption
because
of Moses.
I mean, I've heard of those, but I thought, I know
Sibylline
them.
Oracles. Yeah, there's quite a few different books. Some of them are in the
The Catholic one,
Apocrypha, and some of them are not. But there's many intertestamental writings. Anyway, all I'm trying to do is prove to you, John doesn't come up with this as an original idea. With John's description of the dissolution of the universe, he's simply going back to all these writings and saying, this is the way it's supposed to happen. It's been prophesied this way for many, many centuries. So, as strong as John's picture may seem to us, there isn't a single detail which can't be found in the Old Testament and intertestamental writings. Well, I'll tell you what, relax. They are not meant to be taken literally. John is taking every terrifying thought possible, and he's piling them all together to form as terrorizing a picture as he possibly can. Now, today, with our vast knowledge of modern science, let me tell you, we can paint several scenarios about the end of the world and the demise of the human race that are every bit as horrifying and terrifying as anything John could possibly come up with. I mean, a massive asteroid impact, the sun going supernova, neutron star burster. There's all kinds of possibilities that could totally destroy the world and the human race in a flash.
The Klingons.
The Klingons, yes. They arrived here cloaked, fully cloaked. We didn't see them coming. So, John is trying to paint this picture of what it would be like when the end comes, okay? And it's his attempt to say to the early Christians, buck up. It's going to be horrible for the Romans. It's going to be a terrible thing that's going to happen. Okay, verses 15 through 17, he goes on. Then the kings of the earth, the princes, the generals, the rich and the mighty, and every slave and every free man hid in caves and among the rocks of the mountains. They called to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can stand? Where does John get all that from? I'll give you one guess. Aye, all right. All right.
You know, you're playing right into my talk today.
Oh, good, good. I'm glad to hear that you would carry on with that.
Yes, I would.
When the day of the Lord comes, men will be afraid. Pangs and sorrows will take hold of them. They will be in pain as a woman who travails, and they would be amazed at one another. Isaiah 13. At that time, even the mighty man would cry bitterly. Zephaniah 1. The inhabitants of the land would tremble. Joel 2. They would be frightened with fear. There would be no place to which to flee and no place in which to hide, and the children of the earth would tremble and quake. Enoch 102. God would come to be a witness against his sinning people. Micah 1. The day of the Lord would be great and terrible, and who could endure it? Joel 2. Men would say to the mountains, cover us, and to the hills, fall on us. Hosea 10. There it all is again. John is not making it up as he goes along. He is using his vast and thorough knowledge of the Scriptures to put together his picture using all these symbols, all of these representations from the Old Testament. When the Lord does come, people look for places to hide. Well, that's not hard to understand. I mean, isn't that the natural reaction of anybody who sins? To hide? I mean, that started with Adam and Eve. What did they do? What was the first thing they did when God came to the garden?
G-strings.
Well, yeah, they were ashamed of their nakedness and they tried to hide. They tried to hide from God because they had violated God's orders. If you want to think of something that's worse than death, I think one thing is appearing before God in all of your sin. That is bad. That is really bad. Yet, Jesus Christ has restored our relationship with God. And he's restored it so much that nobody needs to hide from God anymore. Knowing that we can cast ourselves on God's love and mercy and grace, and we don't have to hide. We don't have to be ashamed of our sin. The price has been paid for it. How do we explain the phrase, the wrath of the Lamb? Isn't Jesus gentle and mild? Isn't Jesus loving and meek?
He's forgiving.
What?
He's forgiving. I mean, that's the whole deal.
Yes, well, then what is this deal about the wrath of the Lamb?
Well, in the temple, when he overturned the tables, that was wrath.
It's a wrath born of love. What kind of example can you find in human existence? What about a mother or a father who loves their child and punishes their child? Why? Because they're on good. So the wrath of the Lamb, we're not being presented here with a Jesus whose face is contorted in anger and wants to wreak revenge on everybody. It's a wrath and an anger born out of love.
Kind of a disappointment, would you say?
Pardon?
Kind of a disappointment, his wrath
In what way?
in us.
In us? Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. If we're honest, we know we deserve much worse. And if you are agreeing that we deserve much worse, then in so doing you are favored. It's like the example that Jesus gave of the Pharisee praying loudly in public so that everybody could hear, saying, God, you are so lucky to have a person like me who can obey all your rules and regulations and be so religious. And then he points to the dark corner where a profound sinner is weeping and praying to God in private, I am the worst sinner of all sinners. God says, or Jesus says, God hears that man long before he pays any attention to the prayers of the Pharisee. Okay, we move into chapter 7, and we're going to have some fun with this one. After this, I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the 4 winds of the earth, to prevent any wind from blowing on the land or on the sea or in any tree. Then I saw another angel coming up from the east, having the seal of the living God, and he called out in a loud voice to the four angels who had been given power to harm the land and the sea, "Do not harm the land or the sea or the trees until we put a seal on the foreheads of the servants of our God." And then I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 from all the tribes of Israel. Before we go any further into chapter 7, let me give you a little bit of a forecast. What is chapter 7 all about? John is seeing one of his visions here in chapter 7 of the last terrible days, during which there is a final assault on good by every evil power that is going to attempt to devastate the world. The winds, the four winds, north, south, east, and west, are waiting in check to play their part in this devastation. Before this devastation takes place, however, the faithful are to be sealed. They are to be given a mark, a seal, on their forehead, in order that they will be able to survive and be brought safely through the devastation. Note this: the faithful are not spared the experience of the devastation, but they will survive it. Then the vision pictures the faithful after the tribulation has passed. This is as we go through chapter 7. And the faithful are found in perfect peace and satisfaction in the presence of God. They end up with unmeasurable joy. So, this chapter has three elements to it. We start out a warning of what's to come. Second of all, an assurance that the faithful will survive. And third, a promise that the faithful will end in blessed peace and joy. So, first, having read the first three verses there, this vision of things to come is based upon common concepts of the ancient world in which John lived. First of all, yes, the earth is thought to be flat and square. And so there are four corners to the earth, right? Okay. And there are four angels at each corner, one at each corner. And those four angels control the four winds. Wind is a symbol of destruction. Ask the folks down in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, if that makes sense. 165-mile-an-hour hurricane winds. Ask people in the Great Plains to get hit with a tornado. Ask the people in Israel who put up with these sirocco's, those huge desert blasting winds that come in. Winds represent destruction. The four angels at the four corners of the earth are holding those winds in abeyance and waiting. Why are they waiting? They're waiting for the faithful to be sealed, to be marked. Who has number 56, Isaiah 11:2?
Is that me?
I think so.
It says 11:12 on the sheet.
I'm sorry, 11:12 is correct.
He will raise a banner for the nations and gather the exiles of Israel. He will assemble the scattered people of Judea from the four corners of the earth. Ephraim's jealousy will vanish, and Judah's enemies will be cut off. Ephraim will not be jealous of Judea, nor Judea's hostile towards Ephraim.
You run well past it again, my dear, but that's okay.
Well, I was just doing so well, I thought I would.
Who has number 57, Ezekiel 7:2?
The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, this is what the sovereign Lord says to the land of Israel, the end. The end has come upon the four corners of the land.
Okay, who has 59, Amos 1:14?
I think we do.
Okay,
1:14, okay. So I will kindle a fire against the wall of Rabbah, fire that shall devour its strongholds, with shouting on the day of battle, with a storm on the day of the whirlwind. Then their king shall go into exile, and he and his officials together, says the Lord.
See, there's all kinds of references throughout the Old Testament to these winds, and they all symbolize destruction and violence. So this is where John gets this particular concept. Now, there's two further points to note regarding the faithful who are to be marked with the seal of God. The angel with the seal comes from the rising sun out of the east. What is the rising sun out of the east symbolic of?
New beginning.
A new
New
day.
beginning, life, new light, okay? And just incidentally, it's also the same direction in which the star rose to foretell the birth of Christ. But anyway, that's another whole story. And the angel has the seal which belongs to the living God, as opposed to a dead God. What does that refer to? Well, John sees the gods of the heathens as dead nothings. They're dead idols, they're nothing. Our God is a living God, and that is important. That is a big encouragement to the Christians. Only in a living God is there any satisfaction. Only in a living God in whom there can be fellowship and communication and interaction. It's only in a living God that the children of God can be protected and cared for on an ongoing basis. You can't have that from a dead God. Those things are very important to the early Christians who are suffering so much. And it is with a living God only that there can be any promise of ongoing help and protection in the future. And so in verses 4 through 8, we read this very peculiar passage. Then I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 from all the tribes of Israel. From the tribe of Judah, 12,000 were sealed. Reuben, 12. Gad, 12. Asher, 12. Naphtali, 12. Manasseh, 12. Simeon, 12. Levi, 12. Issachar, 12. Zebulun, 12. Joseph, 12. Benjamin, 12.
1,000.
Does anybody know enough about the 12 tribes of Israel to say anything peculiar here? There's three odd things.
Well, we should have the half tribes of Manasseh.
Yes, that's one of the things that's wrong with this list. There's a couple of other things wrong. Well, not wrong. They were done intentionally by John. But there's... Okay. Those to be brought safely through the great tribulation are sealed upon the forehead. The origin of that idea comes from Zedekiah chapter 9, verses 1 through 7. That's where John got this concept. Now, in real life, at the time of John, a seal indicated either service or possession. Let me explain. A merchant who had a shipment of goods, okay, had his seal upon it, and that certified that it belonged to him. A master would have a seal marked on a slave, which in fact proved that the slave belonged to him. It was his property. So, the seal that the angel is placing upon the foreheads of the faithful shows that these people belong to God, and that they are under God's power and authority. Okay. Now, you might ask,
Which of these tribes were Christians?
beg your pardon?
Which of these tribes were Christians?
Well, it appears that we're left out in the cold here, doesn't it? Now, you might ask, what's with the 144,000? What is the deal with 144,000? It does not stand for the exact number of faithful in all times and generations, obviously.
But the
Otherwise, we are all in real deep trouble.
the Jehovah's Witnesses believe it does.
That's exactly right. That's where they get it from. They are merged together in verse 9, which I haven't gotten to yet. In verse 9 it goes on to say, "After this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne and in front of the Lamb. They were wearing white robes, and they were holding palm branches in their hands." So he goes from 144,000 to a countless multitude here, from everywhere, all kinds of people, Christians included.
We're back in.
Yeah, we're back in. This is where we get back in. So the number 144,000 does not stand for limitation. It stands for perfection. It's one of those numbers. 12 times 12 is the perfect square. 12 times 12 is 144. 144,000 tells us that the number saved will be enormous, beyond counting. Now, let's go back and take a look at the naming of the 12 tribes. The tribe that's named first is Judah. Now, the tribes were always named in the order of the oldest son to the youngest son. And the oldest son was Reuben. So why isn't Reuben listed first and Judah is? You know?
David?
Yes, because the Messiah, the Lamb, comes from the tribe of Judah. So John lists Judah first. The second thing you might notice, what happened to the tribe of Dan? It's not on there. It isn't even listed. It's completely omitted. Well, that's because Jewish tradition had the tribe of Dan associated with idolatry and graven images. This was the downfall of the tribe of Dan. And it came to be in Jewish Christian thinking that the Antichrist would come from the tribe of Dan. So John strikes out the tribe of Dan. And then the other thing, Dave picked up on, the list of 12 is completed, however, once the tribe of Dan is out, by the inclusion of Manasseh, which is usually part of the tribe of Joseph. So John has got some changes in here, but they were very intentional. They were very specific for very good, specific reasons. Okay, we're going to stop there for this week and start with verses 9 and 10 in chapter 7. And maybe, if we're lucky, we can get to chapter 8 2 weeks from now, where we can really get into the bad stuff.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, yes.
Who was, you know, when you read Paul, he's got his letters to either individuals or various synagogues, whatever. Who's the intended audience for John?
For the John of writer of Revelation, I would say it would be almost exclusively the persecuted Christians. Many of whom were Jewish Christians,
Yeah.
but not all. Many of them were Gentiles. But his whole thrust here is to try and provide encouragement to the Christians who, at this period of time, are really taking the shorts. I mean, they're really
encouragement.
Yes.
Good job, thanks, Brian.
You bet.